Please go ahead.
Yeah, as you read through the chapter, we don't see this kind of a destruction or a wrath in Daniel's account. We see very little, actually. When Belshazzar violates the holy vessels by having a wine bash with all his friends and all the royal family in Babylon, it says he was slain that same night in Daniel chapter 5. But this extensive description isn't found in that place when it changes hands over to Persia. So we must see this as a yet future event. I think when Persia, the Medes, came and took over Babylon at that time, they preserved a lot of its resources. And they continued to use Daniel. Darius, he continued to honor Daniel. And so I think this chapter 13 must contain mainly future. Yet the ultimate fall of Babylon is fallen. What do you think of that?
You're right. Much of it is for future, but also secular history records very interesting, strange things, what Medo-Persians did to Babylon. After that night, Cyrus conquered, and the future kings or emperors of Medo-Persia, they unleashed terror against Babylonians. The first kind of terror, as recorded by historians, was a religious terror. They killed a bunch of the priests, and they tore down the Babylonian idols, and they were replaced by Persian idols. Some of them were left desolate. They just destroyed. They felt that the religion of Babylon was a threat to them. So there's a judgment on religious layer of Babylon, and the political, whoever opponents are there, they were decimated. So there was terror, at least recorded in some ways by historians. That far I would say.
Yeah, okay. I have not read any the secular history on the fall of Babylon, but I'd imagine there is some out there. I only really knew about Daniel chapter 5, that transition that took place at that time. It has very little description of the transition.
Yeah, eventually it became uninhabited place. After a series of judgments on Babylon.
Okay.
That was also a historical fact. And Saddam Hussein, he tried to rebuild parts of Babylonian, how do we say it? The remains, relics of Babylon, he tried to restore. And as soon as he started to revive Babylon, that was end of his career. He was killed. So nobody dared to revive Babylon. It's almost as if it stands as a desolate, uninhabited place. That is another thing I wanted to mention.
So he had apparently some kind of delusions of grandeur for himself.
Yeah.
And it never materialized.
Yeah. He has coins minted in Iraq. I saw the picture of that coin. Probably you would find it if you Google it. They have that coin has an icon of Nebuchadnezzar and side by side Saddam Hussein. So perhaps
Oh,
he's
wow.
claiming himself to be Nebuchadnezzar.
Yeah, that would be an interesting coin to have as a conversation piece.
Hmm.
Um, Also, I noticed here when you drop down in the chapter where it talks about in verse 21, it's talking about the wild beasts, the owls, the ostrich, the goats, the hyenas, and the jackals. I think these animals are symbolic of unclean spirits that dwell in wilderness areas.
Mm-hmm.
In another place, it says, I think it's is it in Zechariah? Or no, it's in Revelation. It says, has become the habitation of every foul spirit and every unclean and hated bird
Yep. Yep.
for Babylon. So yeah, there's quite a description here that really meshes well with Joel. So we can see that clearly,
Yeah.
especially in verse 10. Verse 9, day of the Lord.
Yeah.
And verse 10, the stars not giving light and the moon, and the sun. But interesting in verse 11 is I punish the world for its evil. What you said was it was a broad base that Babylon covers this system of political, military, and religious and economic. It covers the earth.
Yeah.
So that's why it says here the world. It's a vast expanse of power and influence and control.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's a lot in this chapter. And where it says chapter 13, I penciled in there, see chapter 21, because that chapter 21 has extensive also description of, of Babylon's demise. I don't know if that was important or not to your study.
They consider chapter 13 to 23 as one unit. Some of the teachers. So the series of Gentile nations that surrounded Judea, the people of God, covenanted people of God. So these are surrounding nations that have influence on Judea, or Judea has influence on them. And God would judge each of the nations in those chapters 13 to 24. So they all seem to somehow, even though different nations are there, these scripts tend to merge uh, into some form of God's wrath against the whole world. That's where these chapters end. But they
Yeah,
don't.
because they're all in succession, and they have to obviously be in the same time frame
Yeah, yeah,
as if they're all happening concurrently. If judgment is on the whole world, it would cover all these places that are mentioned in the chapters against Moab and Damascus and
Tyre and Philistia.
yeah.
I took a little bit longer time to explain the background concepts. I hope that you are okay with that. Uh, my sketches, even though they are not perfect, but hope that the sketches would convey the concept.
Yeah, of course they do. Yeah. There's so many places that also mesh with these
Yeah,
throughout the rest of the prophets. As you're probably planning to go to Jeremiah 50,
50, 51.
51, yeah,
Yeah.
and some of the others. And you're probably going to spend some time on "Come out of her, my people, and be
Yes.
separate."
When we come to Revelation, uh, that's the call. Even in Jeremiah 50, 51, we have those concepts echoed.
Yeah. Yeah, I was surprised when I looked at that and I looked at the cross references, how many different places say that. There's quite a variety of places that say "come out."
Yeah. Now, if you go to Joel, the day of the Lord was associated there with vast army of locusts. They come and attack. And here you have Medo-Persians coming and attacking. There are several independent threats. They seem to converge on one end time forces, I think. There are lots of similarities across different threads. We think they are unrelated, but somehow they become synonymous with each other. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, what do you think about this, this in verse 10? Compare verse 10 with the plague of darkness in Egypt, one of the 10 plagues of darkness. Do you think, remember when you went through the 10 plagues? Do you think this verse 10 could have some some of the same inference here? Is this the same thing?
Stars of heaven and the constellations thereof shall not give their light. The sun shall be darkened in his going forth, and the moon shall not cause her light to shine. So when the locusts went ahead, there was some darkness. That is one immediate thought. But second thought, I think it has to be first, is the darkness that set over the whole Egypt. People could not see anybody else, even their own selves. They don't know where their nose was. They have to
Yeah.
move their hands and search and find their nose. That was the pitch dark. And everybody stood where they are for their entire period of darkness. I think that is related to here.
Yeah, that's what I thought too. There
Yeah.
seems to be so much similarity there because you went through the plagues as the two witnesses can call down the plagues
Yes.
as needed.
Yes. And sun going dark, moon shall not give her light. We see that in Matthew 24, Olivet prophecy. Also, we see that in Joel. Wherever day of the Lord happens, you have that signature statement. This is a signature statement, I believe. The sun, moon, and stars. The signature statement, wherever it occurs in the Bible, there you can almost jump and assume that it is talking about the day of the Lord. We can go in very detail for this chapter 13. It's going to take up lots of time. I did it very high level so that we get an idea. This is, I believe this is first cut we are doing, but we would do for second and third cuts when we revisit, perhaps after several months, after a year or two, when we come back to these verses, we will do it with a magnifying glass, with a bull's eye. We would do at that time. We can have a separate series on just Babylon. At that time, we would go verse by verse and really build up the concepts. But right now we are in two witnesses, so I'm giving you a very high level sketch view of Babylon. Just basics, bare minimum, bare bone basics. That's what we are doing now for Babylon. But that's good, I think. People are not familiar with Babylon, but now have some idea, some fair dim view of Babylon. We have to start somewhere, right?
Oh yeah, you have to start somewhere, and it's always good to see things again that maybe you. I know years and years ago when I went through this material, uh, I didn't stay there. I moved on to other things, and now it's gotten to where I don't remember going through it. To tell you the truth, it's like renewing it is showing many more connections than the first time I read through this.
Yeah, sure. I wanted to say one more thing. Having strong military itself is not evil. Being a prosperous country itself is not evil. But the evil is, I think, for the whole Babylon is in rebellion against God and in opposition to God. Let us make a name for ourselves. That's where they don't have any restraint. They don't have character and restraint to handle this much resources, these many resources of being number one military, number one wealthy country, number one commerce, number one in their religion, and everything number one, and luxuries. We see that more in Jeremiah 51 as well as Revelation 17 and 18. They have best things at their disposal. The glorying, apart from God, against God, the glory. And then because they don't have restraint, they go cruel and they become barbaric and they become devilish and demonic. That's where they cross all the limits, all the restraint, and they transition themselves into this most wicked entity. And God no wonder says, its sins have come remembrance before God. So Babylon's sins have raised even to the level of throne of God, and God remembered her sins. Whatever that means, God remembered her sins. So,
Well, some of that could mean compared to you and I and his people, he doesn't remember their sins. Right?
yeah,
And their sins and their lawlessness, I will remember no more, meaning they've been atoned for. Well, Babylon is not atoned for.
Sure.
So he remembers their sin because they have not made peace with him. That could be part of why it says, and he remembered their sins. I mean, it's a simplistic sounding answer, but I think he remembers them also because they're continual and no signs of repentance. Therefore, there's a much greater remembering of them because there's no sorrow, there's no regret, no repentance. So he's remembering them almost like there's a certain breaking point. Okay, I remember all these things you're doing, and suddenly it's going to be like it says in one place, like a wall that breaks through suddenly. So there's a certain breaking point where it's God himself says, that's it. There will be no more of this. I will not permit this any longer. And then he intervenes against them. Kind of like the way that the verse says, the times of the Gentiles, right? The times of the Gentiles will come to a close at his appointed time.
Yeah.
Another interesting fact about this chapter, it's written approximately 200 years before the fall of Babylon to the Persians.
Yeah.
If you look at Isaiah as about 720 BC, and the fall of
700s.
Babylon around 520.
Yeah.
I don't know if that really means anything. Probably not. It's just this is one of the reasons that Bible skeptics speak against the credibility of the Bible, because they don't want to admit that someone could know in advance the name of Cyrus and so forth. They would know 200 years in advance that this was going to happen.
Yeah, I've heard that discussion. So the skeptics have no limits, right? That's why God says in the Proverbs, fool says there is no God. So they would be proved to be fools if they question word of God. But the scripts God is giving much ahead, like 100 or 200 years ahead of time before these things took place in physical layer. And many hundreds of years for the spiritual Babylon to appear and the spiritual judgment to take place, that is spiritual Cyrus. So these are laying prophetic foundations for many, many, many years.
So, what do you think about the pattern of God calls Abraham out of Babylon to take him to a place to see his inheritance?
Yeah.
All the way to the end of the age, he's calling his people out of Babylon. As if this theme is a continual theme that runs throughout the ages. He starts by calling him out of Ur of the Chaldees and then ends with, come out of her, my people.
Yeah.
There's like a continuum of that theme.
It looks to me like that, like as early as Abraham, God has this script in mind. A godly figure, a faithful father of the faithful, has to leave Babylon These things play in physical layers, but God would not tell us all about Babylon at that time. He simply commands Abraham to pack his suitcases and leave. Only that much he tells in the beginning, but later on he develops that concept why a godly person has to leave Babylon. You're right. These scripts are way early. They were laid there. In fact, Garden of Eden is another place we can go for Babylon. When Eve decided to eat the fruit, she became Babylon because she decided to have her own God, not the true God, not the real God, her own God in her own mind. And she usurped God's authority. Let us make a Shem after our own Shem. That's what she did conceptually and went ahead and ate that fruit. So we have first incidence of Babylon, and she became mother of all idolatry, mother of harlotry. So you can make a case for her to be mother, a foundation for mystery Babylon in Book of Revelation. It starts from Eve after her fall. Before her fall, Eve pictured New Jerusalem because she was right standing with God and she was mother of all living. That's what Adam called her. She's called Eve because she's mother of all living. And also, she was made from man. So, Eve represents both the woman, both the mothers. Isn't it fascinating? So, that's the first occurrence of Babylon, Tower of Babel, and then Abraham. And these are early scripts. And then Isaiah 13. And God continues to build this concept, Babylon. And Revelation 17 and 18 are really, it reaches its climax, I believe.
Well, what do you think about Hagar being the bondwoman? Abraham decided to take matters into his own hands and make a decision to take Hagar to make baby, to make a son of promise that could never be the son of promise. So he takes Hagar and tries to force his own way to make the son of promise, and it becomes bondage. And Sarah is in bondage to Ishmael. And it says in Galatians, the son of the bondwoman, cast out the son of the bondwoman.
Correct.
This is all because he made his own Shem. Abraham said, I'm going to do it my way.
Yeah.
I can't wait I don't have the patience to wait for God to do it. I'm going to do it my way.
Yeah.
So he came in bondage to his own decision and all that trouble that came upon that family because of Hagar and Ishmael.
Yeah, the trio decided Sarah first, and Abraham yields, and then Hagar agrees for this arrangement. And we have Ishmael as the product of that. Let us make our own Shem. So the product is Ishmael. And then eventually God comes and blesses Sarah, and she will have Isaac. It's that pictures New Jerusalem. Sarah becomes New Jerusalem. Hagar becomes earthly Jerusalem, which is in bondage. And then that bondage is again, she pictures probably Babylon in some aspects. But when we come to 17 and 18, I'm giving you very advanced where we are going. It becomes Jerusalem. The mystery woman becomes Jerusalem. Jerusalem becomes the epicenter of mystery Babylon. There are simply too many verses that would point us to Jerusalem now that is in the Middle East.
Yeah. Which could also be symbolic of the church gone bad. If we want to take the word Jerusalem, which is Sodom and Egypt, and we want to take it in a symbolic sense, but not in a geographical sense, we see that the faith originally went forth from Jerusalem, but now the church gone bad, the apostate church is the representation of Babylon.
Correct. Correct.
Rather than a geographical location. But we can say that we can see that both of them are compared to Babylon.
That's correct.
So it gets kind of complicated when you start to examine all the symbolism and try to piece it together. Because some things symbolically can mean more than one. I think Babylon means more than one thing.
That's just the difficulty with Babylon. You have multi-layered teaching. These are truly multi-layered concepts. And when we come to Revelation, people will be lost. That's what most commentators are saying. Some teachers would say we are entering muddy waters when we come to Revelation. Nothing is very clear and separate. It's like muddy waters. Like, what is Babylon there? Is it political? Is it military? Is it like commerce? Is it religious? What is it referring to? So it's very difficult to differentiate there. Like, there are multiple entities that fall under Babylon. It becomes an umbrella term. It covers many things in many layers. So then begs us the question, whenever they say Babylon is this, Babylon is doing that, you should ask the question, which layer are you in? So it depends on the layer, your answer depends there. So if you are on physical layer, you have one answer. If it is a religious layer or political layer, military layer, commerce layer, you have different answers because probably you're referring to slightly different entity. So woman riding the beast. In some layers, beast becomes Babylon. In other layers, the woman is Babylon. So we should develop that discipline to be layer specific.
Yeah, I understand what you're getting at, because if we speak in generalities, we may not be able to really communicate what we're talking about. So yeah, being more specific as to what era and what aspect is important.
Yeah, let me give you an example. The verse says the voice of bride and voice of bridegroom shall no more be heard in you. That layer is church gone bad. Now you cannot take it to a political entity called Babylon because it never had voice of bride or voice of bridegroom. This verse necessitates that before the entity became Babylon, Once upon a time, maybe in its humble beginnings, it had voice of bride and voice of bridegroom. Now both are absent now. It has become a desolate place. So that verse belongs to a particular layer of church gone bad. That's how each verse finds its place in a particular layer. That's where we are going.
Yeah, that's a really good example because of what those things symbolize. That if his people really do come out of her, then the voice of the bride and bridegroom will not be found in her.
Converse is also true. If you stay there, you are no longer bride. So you have to flee for your life.
Yeah.
Oh,
So if we
this
read,
is, yeah, go ahead.
I was just saying, so if we read the parable of the 10 virgins, we expect that half of the bride stays in Babylon.
Yeah.
I mean, that may not really be a very accurate view, but for some reason, in the parable, there's 5 this way and 5 that way. 5 apparently have enough oil, and 5 apparently do not. So can we kind of equate that with those who come out and those who do not come out? I don't know. Maybe that's a stretch.
You can make a case, you can build a case, but you have to justify it. So when you build a case, you pull all the scriptures and all the concepts together and build a case. But if there is not sufficient evidence in scriptures, then it becomes a weak case. Nevertheless, it's a case. We recognize it as a somewhat weak case. But you can also build a strong case if you have sufficient scriptural evidence. So this is where we ultimately end up in our analysis. There are weak cases, there are intermediately uh, good cases, and there are strong cases. See the granularity of our understanding of the revelation and the prophecy. It gets much more rich, much more vivid. We discussed today, Babylon is judged. So we can just focus on how God judged Babylon at different places where Babylon is found. You can take Tower of Babel and how God judged them, and city-state of Nebuchadnezzar, how God judged that entity. And then you go to Revelation 17:18, you know how God judged that. And Jeremiah 50:51, again, it refers to the physical city-state Babylon. There also you find wealth of information, how God judged that entity. And then you have Sodom and Gomorrah judgment is linked to this judgment. So you can study Sodom and Gomorrah. And Matthew 24, Olivet prophecy, ties up the judgment of Sodom and Gomorrah to the judgment of Noah's antediluvian world. So you can have how the world was judged by flood. that is also becomes like Babylon. So you have several places, several threads that we can discuss how it is judged.
Good night, Willard.
Bye, Willard. Good night.
Good night, folks. I've enjoyed this very much. Guess what? I stayed awake. Gloria will be proud of me.
That's
I'm
nice.
teasing you.
That's
Good
nice.
night, folks.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
There was something I noticed also in verse 19 of the chapter, Isaiah 13:19. I was reading along in the New King James as you were reading. I can't remember if it has the same content, but it says, in Babylon, the glory of kingdoms, the beauty of the Chaldeans' pride. Yours has excellency.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if this is a better translation or not than the King James. This is the new. Here it says the Chaldeans' pride shall be as when God overthrew Sodom and Gomorrah. I was saying, wow, he's got the word pride and Sodom in the same same verse because they have this idea of Pride Month, the LGBT Pride movement is all about pride.
Yes. See, this is such an important verse that brings two independent threads together.
Yeah.
Now, all the LGBTQ is now part of Babylon because they receive same judgment. So that begs us the question, are they same? Spiritual Sodom and Gomorrah are the same as Babylon. It has to be. These are not like random verses. They're coming from God. Isaiah is not thinking and guessing and writing.
No, I see the NET version has the word pride in it. Source of honor and pride. Okay, yeah, I just thought it was strange that it was kind of ironic that the word pride and Sodom appear in the same verse, the same sentence, because they still use that word today.
Yeah, pride movement. You know, many of the teachers see that the signatures would never betray us. The actual people fulfilling that signature in the script, they may not know that they are actually fulfilling that script. The people have no clue who are doing this.
Right.
But the beauty is their signatures were given to us in a code language in the Word of God.
Yeah, I think pride appears several times. Doesn't it appear in Jeremiah's account of? Seems like it appears in some other places as well.
Oh, Jeremiah, he says, you are a proud mountain.
Yeah.
I will make you a burnt mountain. You are a destroying mountain. I will make you a burnt mountain. The pride is very essential thing, the pride and glory of Babylon.
It seems very strange when you're in the presence of someone who is very prideful. It has a very strange feel, like it's just Like it can't end well. It's not going to end well. That's what. Have you ever been around someone that was just like mouthy and very prideful, self-aggrandizing, self-willed? You just get this bad feeling like that will not end well.
Yeah. When you're proud, you also become blind. You no longer have sound reasoning and sound thinking.
Yeah.
One of the Greek words for pride is tuflavo. Tuflavo is very interesting nuance. It's like smoking your brain. It's fogging your reasoning.
Yeah. Yeah, it does do that.
You are
Isn't
no longer realistic. You are no longer standing on ground. You lift yourself with this smoky, foggy thing.
You could probably say that with a lot of sins. You're just not thinking right. If you're angry, uh, anything, idolatrous, whatever, that would affect your thinking. You're just not thinking clear. Wouldn't make wise decisions.
Yeah, I think it divides between wise and foolish. That's a good thing.
Yeah, pride seems to be definitely one of the stronger ones. Takes you down.
Yeah, Proverbs really talks about pride in a generic sense.
There are three Greek words that are used for pride in New Testament. First is hubristes. There is no cure for that prideness. You are locked and imprisoned in that pride state. Very little hope for them. Second is uh, alazania. Alazania is boastful arrogance. So when God comes and takes away all that you have, which you boast, then you are brought to senses. That is alazania. And the third is tuphulas. Tuphulas is mild pride. You you give away your sound reasoning by smoking yourself, fogging yourself with a little bit of pride. Eventually, all the three would be judged. Alazania is very interesting. When Apostle John describes us the world, cosmos, all that is in the world is lust of eyes, lust of flesh, and pride of life. That word pride is alazania. Your pretentious boasting, arrogant boasting of physical possessions. That is one dictionary definition of alazania. You just boast of your physical possessions. That's again Babylon. Babylon boasts in its glory and its abundance, in its luxuries. She pampers herself with dainty things and goody things. How much she exalted herself. Give her double. That's what God's language.
Yeah. I'm looking at Proverbs 8:13, where it talks about pride, arrogancy, and the evil way, the froward mouth. The word froward is perversity or fraud, a perverse thing. So it's a perverted thing to have prideful words.
Yeah.
But here he's saying the fear of the Lord is to hate evil, to hate pride, and to hate arrogancy. Yeah, I can recognize pride in some people sometimes, maybe like celebrities or sports figures. But do I really hate pride and arrogancy, or do I just merely recognize pride and arrogancy? Do you find yourself having an abiding hatred or just a recognition of it? This says to hate it. And then at the end of the verse, do I hate? These things do I hate. I don't think we're trained to hate it. I've never been taught to hate it. I've been taught to resist pride. I've been taught to try to discern pride. But hatred, I have not been taught. But the proverb says, yes, you should hate it because these things do I hate. Am I making any sense here?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. A righteous person is honored and exalted. And even we will let a righteous person slap us because it is good for us. But a vile person is despised. We don't despise vile person. The way we were trained, we were told, hate the evil, but love the person. It doesn't work like that. You have to separate. You have to maintain separation, and you should not. This is much of the internal works that we talk about in epistles of John. Internally, you should never compromise and say it is okay. You should not love that person in the sense of accepting or condoning or saying it is okay. You must make a judgment internal. Once you fail to make that distinction and judgment inside your as an internal work, it is guaranteed that you fail outwardly also, external work at some later point in time. So we fall internally first and then externally. We know these principles, but I'm just rephrasing that. So
Yeah.
if you don't hate pride, arrogancy, and evil way in your heart, eventually you become friends with them and embrace them.
Which is Babylon.
Yeah. But if you say don't criticize them, you have to love them. So you have to define what is loving them, what is not loving them. If you don't define the word love, you're going to go astray. You would go deep into Babylon and live there. Because God says love, so you would love Babylon because love is of God. After all, God is love. Then I will love Babylon. See the reasoning, how it goes.
So it's a perversion where it says love your enemies. It's a perversion to take that verse and justify love of evil people, love of Babylonian attitudes of pride and arrogance.
Yeah.
But,
because we don't define the terms. So it can mean anything to anybody. It becomes a subjective thing.
mm-hmm.
That's the crux of our problem with our churches and our teachers. Like Joel Osteen, he would never define a term. Be nice. Don't pass on this junk to your next generation. He never defines what that junk is. So, if you don't define the terms, you are doing the disservice. But if you start defining the words, then you have a completely different gospel.
Yeah, if you don't define it, it means whatever you want it to mean.
Yeah. In Raymond Mills' Zoom room, one time Raymond got this bright idea. We will read one chapter before the Bible study begins, any book. Then I suggested Proverbs. Let's do every time we come here, let's do one chapter of Proverbs. And we used to rotate among the people. So there's one lady, I don't remember her name. She volunteered that she will read. So we came to some fourth or fifth chapter of Proverbs, and she was reading and she stopped and stuck there. The words are not coming out from her mouth because she was shocked. The scriptures that are telling her, she never heard them. These are very cutting. The Proverbs are really cutting. Wishy-washy, easygoing religion would be challenged. What happened? What happened? Why did you stop? Go ahead. She took like a minute or so to resume reading. It was so hard, like shock to digest what scriptures are telling in Proverbs.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, it says, is not my word like a fire that burns and like a hammer? So if we're reading something and we are suddenly shocked by it, that's a good thing.
Yeah.
We take note of something that seems to be difficult to accept. Some of Nebuchadnezzar's last words. He says, I, Nebuchadnezzar, praise and extol the honor and honor the King of heaven, all whose works are truth and his ways judgment. And then this is the last thing he says. And those that walk in pride, he's able to abase.
He learned it
So-
firsthand.
The king of Babylon makes that statement.
First-hand statement. Sometimes you speak through others' experiences because this guy is his own experience.
It's kind of like, okay, I want to leave you with one last thing that I have to say. Those who walk in pride, he's able to abase. And that's the last thing you hear from them. Oh, that's kind of comical, really. There's a little humor in that's the last word we hear from the king of Babylon. That's really ironic that he puts that last.
I mean, God's judgment has resulted in these words. It takes this pride, most proud Babylon and its most proud king, and God deals with him and makes him to say these words.
Yeah. All right. I think I might have said too much. I think Marlene and Sandra and Rita should say something now.
Your comments are so rich, and I'm thoroughly enjoying them. You've got such a good background of obviously lots of study. So thank you.
Yes, I enjoy it too. I really like listening to you too.
What I thought of, Al, when you said you've not learned to hate pride. Am I off mute?
Yeah, we hear you. Go ahead.
We hear
Okay.
you.
Is it the same as narcissism and people that we've known and saw the result of their narcissism? Is pride a lot like narcissism, or?
I think when pride goes unchecked, a person becomes narcissistic because, as everyone knows, narcissism is a mental illness that has grown from humble beginnings, right? We are just a little bit prideful and no one corrects us.
Mm.
We become increasingly prideful. Then we become self-important and arrogant, and we see ourselves as the center of the universe. And eventually nobody else matters but me. So yeah, I think it's
So we have witnessed it in both people we've known and world leaders, especially, where they're so prideful that it ends up, the actions are very hurtful to everyone.
yeah.
And
Especially in a lot of it's in leadership, and that's why there's so much trouble, because leaders are not willing to humble themselves.
it's
So
where
that
it ends up is they have no, they're like the opposite of God. They have no repugnance against doing evil to others, or not loving. It's not it. They become the opposite of God. They just do
yeah.
everything so evil.
Yeah, and I think that we have to also understand the blindness that comes with narcissism. The person who is a narcissist doesn't see themselves as such. So the blindness to get an accurate view of what they really are, they can't do that. They don't have the ability to see themselves clearly. So it is
Right.
with the leader, any leader of any, whether it's a corporation or a church, they don't see themselves as, that they're unable to be corrected. They don't
Right.
see that.
So do you think narcissism and pride are closely related?
Well, pride, narcissism is pride run amok, right? It went so far, it got to such an extreme that you're even blind to it. Now, maybe early in your life when you're a child, you might recognize pride in one of your friends or in yourself. And you get to be a teenager, and you can still see it in adults, and you can see it all around the world. But as you lose control of your own pride, you eventually become that narcissist. Self-importance, right?
Right. And
So
the
there's
the effects that, like, mainly I think I can only think of one person I've known that way, but the effects are so harmful, and it it pulls other people in for some reason. People are influenced by the people who are prideful or narcissistic. They when they run amok, as you say, they end up really doing a lot of harm. And I end up praying for people for their own sake and the people around them, but especially for their own sake. Like, if God can intercede and heal them of some of, what we would call, I guess, a form of mental illness in the narcissism, but in the pride, it they need our prayers. It feels like,
Yeah, right. Well, Nebuchadnezzar's last words are a testament to that. He is able to humble all the prideful ones.
right.
So yeah, he's able to. I'm not able to. If I
So,
approach somebody and try to explain what I see, they will turn away from me and hate me and maybe send me away and tell me not to come back.
or
But God,
attack. They'll demonize you or attack you.
yeah, and sometimes I'm not saying in every case, but
The world leaders that have done it, then they demonize the rest of the uh, world, the other races, and just make everyone else what's bad in there because it's in their eyes.
yeah,
Well, there was something you said that I agreed with. I like the way you said it. Oh, that God, the last words he said to Nebuchadnezzar was, or I mean, Nebuchadnezzar said, I said that
yeah,
backward. Um, God is able to humble. So if he is able to humble those, then that's what we would pray for and seek for the people who have that tendency or are going that way and hurting people with it. So God can take care of it, is what you
yeah. I
ended up
think,
saying.
concerning church life and church throughout history, as Tagore was saying earlier about the church gone bad, uh, Ezekiel 34 is against the shepherds, because the shepherds, they take the best and they scrape the cream off the top for themselves. And then they stamp the water with their feet and muddy the waters for the sheep. The shepherds abuse and take advantage of. Why are they doing that? Because they're prideful. They see themselves as deserving of being elevated above the others.
So they have no problem, like you said, of taking for themselves. They will enrich themselves and
Yeah,
just take what they consider like rightfully theirs, like you said.
yeah. I can hardly read that chapter, honestly, until he sends his true shepherd who will take care of all their wounds and will feed them with good food, it says. I can hardly read that without tearing, because you ache for the people who have been hurt. When men rise up in pride, some of the sheep scatter. It says in that chapter, they were scattered on the mountains and they became a prey of all the wild beasts. But then good shepherd comes and he takes care of them and heals them. I mean, how can you read that and not well up emotionally? For me, it's a challenge to just read through that section. It's the perfect place to see the fault of church leadership throughout the ages, is what I'm talking about, not necessarily just in our day. But I think it's just always been that way because of pride. I mean, you know the chapter, right? You know the content of it.
Yes, very well.
The Father, he sends the true shepherd then to gather together those who are scattered upon the hills. And it's just it's a magnificent beauty in the second part of the chapter. It's the fulfillment of the gospel, really, in that chapter. The symbolism in it.
This church going bad is not a popular topic among the ministers and teachers in churches
No.
because they're shooting themselves in their foot. So they wouldn't come to that topic. But that is a very important topic, and lots of parables, lots of the scripts, these threads, they revolve around this church going bad.
Yeah. And a large part of that church going bad has directly to do with pride.
Yeah.
The inability to accept correction.
But look at this scenario. If you are not taught or you're not aware of Bible talking so much about church going bad, then what would be your state of mind? You would assume that church would never go bad. And you would think that I would stay with this church rest of my life. And this is where, like church graveyard, I'm going to get buried. And my funeral should take place by so-and-so minister and pastor. After all, churches would not go bad if that's what you believed always. Now scriptures come and shake you up or shake you down if you go line by line, verse by verse.
Yeah.